Respected viewers, beloved seekers of wisdom, dear family of dreamers who gather here today, I welcome you not as strangers, but as fellow travelers on this ancient path toward understanding, toward freedom, toward that quiet place where money becomes not the master, but the servant of a life well lived. Part 1. There is a moment, a single moment in every person's life, when they stand at a crossroads they didn't know existed. On one side, the familiar path of struggle, of trading time for dollars, of believing that wealth is something that happens to other people, to the lucky ones, to those born into the right families or given the right chances. On the other side, a narrow gate, often invisible to those who aren't looking, leading to something our ancestors called financial independence. But here's what most people never understand, what takes decades to learn, if they learn it at all. Financial independence isn't a destination. It's not a number in a bank account. It's not the mansion or the yacht or the private jet. It's a journey through 7 distinct stages, 7 transformations of the human spirit, 7 levels of consciousness about what money really is and what it can never be. And today, right now, in these next precious minutes together, I'm going to share with you what took me a lifetime to understand. Let me tell you about a young man I once knew, 23 years old, standing in a small apartment with bills spread across a rickety kitchen table. The electricity company had sent a final notice. His car had been repossessed 2 weeks earlier, and in his bank account 127, he had a college degree. He had ambition. He had dreams. But what he didn't have, what nobody had ever taught him, was an understanding of the journey he needed to take. That young man made a decision that night, not to get rich quick, not to find some shortcut or scheme, but to understand, truly understand the architecture of wealth. You see, respected viewers, most people spend their entire lives in what I call stage 1 financial dependence. This is where we all begin. As children, we depend entirely on others. But here's the tragedy. Here's what breaks my heart when I see it. So many people never leave this stage. They remain financially dependent their entire lives. Not dependent on their parents anymore, no, but dependent on their next paycheck, dependent on their employer's goodwill, dependent on nothing going wrong. Because when something goes wrong, and it always does, they have no foundation beneath them. I remember meeting a man 57 years old, worked for the same company for 32 years. Good salary, nice house. Took vacations. Looked successful by every external measure. Then the company restructured. His position was eliminated, and within 6 months, he lost everything. Why? Because despite earning good money for 3 decades, he had never progressed beyond stage 1. He had never built what I call a margin of safety. Every dollar that came and went right back out. He was wealthy in income, but bankrupt in assets. Financial dependence isn't about how much you earn. It's about the relationship between what you earn, what you spend, and what you keep. This is where the journey begins with a simple, profound realization. I must keep more than I spend. Not someday. Not when I get a raise now. Stage 2 is what I call financial solvency. This is when you finally climb out of the hole. You stop digging. You pay off the credit cards. You eliminate the consumer debt. You reach 0. Now, let me be honest with you. Reaching 0 doesn't sound exciting, does it? Our culture celebrates the millionaires, the billionaires, the Forbes lists. Nobody writes articles about the person who finally paid off their credit cards. But I'm telling you from decades of watching human behavior and financial outcomes, reaching solvency is one of the most important achievements of your life. Because here's what happens at stage 2. You stop bleeding. You stop paying 18%, 22%, 25% interest to credit card companies. You stop enriching others with your labor while impoverishing yourself. I knew a woman, a school teacher, who spent 7 years getting to stage 2. 7 years of sacrifice. Of driving an old car while her friends bought new ones. Of bringing lunch from home while her colleagues went to restaurants. Of saying no to trips, to purchases, to 1,000 small temptations. Her friends thought she was being cheap. Her family worried she wasn't enjoying life. But she understood something they didn't. She understood that every dollar paid in interest was a dollar that would never work for her. Every month trapped in debt was a month where her future self would remain poor. When she finally reached 0, When she made that last payment and her balance sheet showed no consumer debt, she didn't celebrate with a shopping spree. She didn't reward herself by falling back into the trap. She moved immediately to stage 3. Stage 3 financial stability. This is where you build your foundation. Your emergency fund, 3 months of expenses, then 6 months, the money that lets you sleep at night. Most people, and this saddens me deeply, most people never build this foundation. They go their entire lives one car repair, one medical bill, one unexpected expense away from financial crisis. They live in a state of perpetual anxiety, not dramatic anxiety, not the kind that sends you to the hospital, but that low-grade stress that hums in the background of every day, that makes you check your bank balance before buying groceries, that makes you pray nothing breaks, nothing fails, nothing requires money you don't have. Financial stability is freedom from that anxiety. It's knowing that when something goes wrong, and it will, you have resources, you have time, you have options. I remember the first time I had 6 months of expenses saved. I was in my 30s. It wasn't a huge amount of money by objective standards, but the psychological shift, the transformation in how I felt about my life was immeasurable. Suddenly, I could take calculated risks. I could say no to opportunities that didn't align with my values. I could negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation. An interesting thing happens when you reach stage 3. Your relationship with money begins to change. You stop seeing it as something to spend and start seeing it as something to deploy. You stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like an investor. But here's the trap at stage 3, and I want you to hear this carefully. Many people reach stability and they stop. They think, I've made it. I have my emergency fund. I'm stable. I can relax now. And they spend the next 30 years of their life at stage 3. Stable but not growing. Secure but not free. Comfortable but not independent. There's nothing wrong with stage 3. It's infinitely better than stages 1 or 2. But if you stop here, if you don't continue the journey, you'll reach retirement age with stability but without freedom. You'll have enough to survive but not enough to thrive. Let me tell you about my friend Henry. Henry was a mechanic, started working at 16, never went to college, spent 40 years fixing cars. Henry understood something that many Harvard graduates don't understand. He understood that financial independence wasn't about how much you earned. It was about the gap between earning and spending and what you did with that gap. Every week, Henry took 20% of his paycheck before he paid any bills, before he bought any groceries, before he did anything else, and he put it aside. Some weeks that 20% was $30. Some weeks it was $50. It wasn't the amount that mattered. It was the habit, the discipline, the understanding that he was building something. Henry's coworkers made fun of him. They'd go out for drinks after work and Henry would go home. They'd buy new trucks and Henry drove the same pickup for 15 years. They'd take expensive vacations and Henry would go camping. They called him cheap. They called him boring. They said he wasn't living. But Henry was playing a different game. He was moving towards stage 4 financial security. Stage 4 is when your investments, your assets, begin generating enough passive income to cover your basic necessities. Not your entire lifestyle, just the essentials. Food, shelter, utilities, basic transportation. This is the stage where money starts working for you instead of you working for money. Where the machine you've been building piece by piece, dollar by dollar, year by year starts producing its own energy. Henry reached stage 4 at 52 years old. His dividend income and rental property covered his basic expenses. He still worked as a mechanic because he loved cars, because he enjoyed the craft, because work gave his life meaning. But here's what changed: he worked because he wanted to, not because he had to. If the shop closed, he'd be fine. If he got sick and couldn't work for 6 months, he'd be fine. If he decided tomorrow to spend a year traveling, he could. That's security. Real security. Not the illusion of security that comes from a good job or a nice salary, but the deep, foundational security that comes from having built something that provides for you, too. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something important. Something that might surprise you. Most people, the vast majority of people, never need to go beyond stage 4. Financial security is enough. It's enough for a peaceful life, for a dignified retirement, for sleeping well at night. There's no shame in stopping at stage 4. There's no failure in saying, this is enough. I have security. I can provide for my family. I can pursue work I find meaningful without the sword of financial necessity hanging over my head. I'm content. In fact, and this is crucial, if you reach stage 4 and you're still miserable, if you're still anxious, if you're still feeling like something's missing, the problem isn't your financial stage. The problem is something deeper, something money can never fix. Because here's a truth that nobody wants to hear: money above the level of security doesn't buy happiness. It buys options. It buys experiences. It buys comfort and convenience. But it doesn't buy peace of mind. It doesn't buy purpose. It doesn't buy love or meaning or fulfillment. I've known billionaires who were miserable. I've known people with 8-figure net worths who couldn't sleep at night, who were consumed by anxiety, who felt empty inside. And I've known people like Henry, people with modest means who had reached security, who were some of the most content, peaceful, joyful people I've ever met. So as we continue this journey through the remaining stages, I want you to hold this truth: the destination isn't wealth. The destination is wisdom, understanding, a proper relationship with money where it serves your life rather than consuming it. With that understanding, with that foundation, let's continue. Stage 5 is financial independence. This is what most people mean when they talk about financial freedom. This is when your passive income covers not just your basic necessities, but your entire lifestyle. Everything you want to do, buy, experience, all of it covered by money working for you. You don't need a job. You don't need to sell your time. You are, in the truest sense, financially independent. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Sounds like the promised land, and it can be. For people who have done the inner work, for people who understand themselves, for people who have purpose beyond accumulation. But I've also seen people reach stage 5 and fall apart because they spent 30 years working toward this moment, and when they finally arrived, they discovered they had no idea what to do with themselves. They had been so focused on building wealth that they forgot to build a life. They had been so disciplined at saving and investing that they never learned how to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They reached financial independence and realized they were emotionally dependent on work, on business, on the identity of being a productive person. I know a man, let's call him Richard, who reached financial independence at 48. Remarkable achievement. He had built multiple businesses, invested wisely, and his portfolio generated more than enough income for any lifestyle he could imagine. He retired, quit working, finally had time for all those things he always said he'd do someday. 6 months later, he was depressed. A year later, he had gained 40 pounds. His marriage was struggling, and he told me he felt like his life had lost all meaning. Why? Because Richard had confused financial independence with life independence. He thought that once money was handled, everything else would fall into place. He thought freedom from work would automatically create freedom for something better. But freedom from something isn't the same as freedom for something. Richard eventually went back to work. Not because he needed the money, but because he needed the structure, the challenge, the sense of contribution. He learned that stage 5 wasn't about stopping. It was about having the freedom to choose what you worked on, who you worked with, and why you worked at all. The people who thrive at stage 5 are the people who understand this. They're financially independent but not idle. They're free from economic necessity but not free from purpose. They use their independence to pursue what matters most to them, whether that's starting new businesses, supporting causes they believe in, creating art, teaching, mentoring, or simply being fully present for their families. Financial independence gives you the most precious resource in the world, time. What you do with that time, how you invest it, determines whether stage 5 is a blessing or a curse. I want to share something personal with you now, something I don't talk about often. There was a period in my life, years, actually, when I was wealthy by any objective measure but poor in spirit. My investments were performing well. My net worth was growing. By every financial metric, I was succeeding, but I had lost touch with why I was doing any of it. The accumulation had become automatic, habitual, almost compulsive. I would check my portfolio returns the way some people check social media, constantly, reflexively, searching for some hit of validation. I remember sitting in a beautiful home, looking at statements showing 7-figure balances, and feeling empty, wondering what it was all for, wondering why the achievement of financial goals brought so little satisfaction. It took me years to understand what was happening. I had reached financial independence without developing philosophical independence. I was still measuring my worth by external standards, still comparing myself to others, still believing deep down that the number had to get bigger for me to be okay. The breakthrough came when I asked myself a different question. But what is this for? What was the money for? Not in abstract terms, not security or freedom in the generic sense, but specifically, concretely. What did I want to do with my days? What contribution did I want to make? What legacy did I want to leave? When I got clear on those answers, when I realigned my financial life with my deeper values, everything changed. The money didn't become less important, but it became properly important. A tool, not a scorecard. A means, not an end. That's when I truly moved from stage 5 to stage 6. Compare to it. Stage 6, financial abundance. Now this is where most people get confused. They think abundance is just a bigger number. Stage 5 with more zeros, a larger portfolio, a fancier lifestyle. But that's not what abundance means. Not in the way I'm using it. Not in the way that matters. Financial abundance is when you have more than you need, more than you could spend in your lifetime. And you begin to understand that the purpose of wealth, beyond a certain point, isn't personal consumption. It's contribution. It's impact. It's using your resources to create value for others. This is the stage where you stop asking, what can money do for me? And start asking, what can I do with this money? Let me tell you about a woman I knew, Sarah. She built a software company from nothing, worked 80-hour weeks for 15 years, took enormous risks, made sacrifices most people couldn't imagine. The company went public. Sarah's shares were worth $180 million. Overnight, she went from financially independent to financially abundant. More money than she could spend. More than her children could spend. Generational wealth. And you know what happened. For the first 6 months, nothing changed. She kept working the same hours, kept living in the same house, kept driving the same car. The number in her account was different, but her life was identical. Then one day, she was reading about a school district in a low-income area where the science labs hadn't been updated in 30 years. Kids were using equipment from the 1970s, learning chemistry with beakers that were older than their parents. Sarah wrote a check, funded a complete renovation of the science facilities in 3 schools. New equipment, new technology, trained teachers in modern methodologies. She told me later that writing that check, seeing those kids walking into a brand new lab with equipment she had provided, gave her more satisfaction than any business deal she'd ever closed. More joy than watching her stock price rise. More meaning than adding another million to her net worth. That's when she understood abundance. Not as an amount, but as a responsibility, a sacred trust. Here's something most people never grasp about wealth. After a certain point, keeping score becomes absurd. Think about it. If you have $10 million invested conservatively, returning 4% annually, that's $400,000 a year without touching the principal. If you're spending $200,000 a year, and that's a very comfortable lifestyle by any standard, your wealth grows by $200,000 annually without you doing anything. In 5 years, you have $11 million. In 10 years, with compound returns, you might have $13 million. In 20 years, maybe $20 million. At what point does the additional wealth change your life? At what point does $20 million give you something that $10 million didn't? Better vacations. You could already go anywhere. Nicer car. You could already buy any car. Bigger house. You could already live anywhere. The additional wealth doesn't change your life, but it could change someone else's life. Dramatically. Permanently. That's the insight of stage 6. That's the consciousness shift that separates abundance from mere wealth. I've watched people struggle with this transition. They have more than enough, but they can't stop accumulating. They're terrified of losing what they have. They're addicted to watching the numbers grow. They've spent so long in scarcity mindset that they can't shift to abundance mindset. It's tragic, really. They've won the financial game, but they don't know how to stop playing. They're so afraid of not having enough that they can never enjoy having more than enough. Let me share with you one of the most important lessons I've learned about money and happiness. There's a concept in economics called diminishing marginal utility. Fancy term for a simple idea: the more you have of something, the less satisfaction each additional unit provides. Your first slice of pizza when you're hungry, incredible. Your second slice, still good. Your third, okay. Your fourth, you're getting full. Your fifth, you feel sick. The same principle applies to money. Your first $50,000 a year, life-changing, takes you from poverty to basic security. Your next $50,000, getting you to $100,000, still makes a big difference. Nicer home, better food, some travel, but going from $500,000 to $550,000, barely noticeable. Going from $5 million to $5 million. No impact on your daily life whatsoever. Yet I've watched people sacrifice their health, their relationships, their integrity, trying to add zeros to numbers that are already more than sufficient. Why? Because they never developed a philosophy of enough. They never asked themselves the most important financial question: how much is enough? Not enough to impress people. Not enough to win. Not enough to never worry again, because if you're prone to worry, no amount of money will stop it. But enough for you, for your values, for your vision of a life well lived. Without that answer, without that internal compass, you'll keep chasing more forever. And you'll arrive at the end of your life wealthy in assets, but bankrupt in time. Rich in dollars, but poor in experiences. Successful by society's metrics, but unfulfilled by your own. I want to tell you about my friend Tom. Tom was a real estate investor. Started with one small rental property in his 20s. By his 60s, he owned hundreds of properties. Net worth somewhere north of $40 million. Tom never bought expensive things. Never cared about status symbols. Lived in a modest home, drove a 10-year-old truck, wore jeans and button-down shirts from discount stores. People who didn't know him thought he was a retired middle-class guy. People who did know him couldn't understand why someone with his wealth lived so simply. But Tom had clarity. He knew exactly how much was enough. He calculated that he needed $150,000 a year to live the life he wanted. Travel with his wife, support his kids and grandkids, donate to causes he cared about, maintain his health, pursue his hobbies. His portfolio generated 10 times that amount annually. Every year he took his $150,000 for living expenses and gave away or reinvested the rest, funded scholarships, built affordable housing, supported local businesses. Tom understood something profound. Wealth beyond the point of security and comfort isn't really yours to keep. It's yours to steward. You're the temporary custodian of resources that could do tremendous good in the world. He used to say, money is like manure. Pile it up in one place and it stinks. Spread it around and things grow. That's stage 6 consciousness. That's financial abundance. But there's still one more stage, one more level of understanding, one more transformation that few people ever reach. Stage 7, financial enlightenment. This is the rarest stage. The stage that has nothing to do with net worth and everything to do with wisdom. Financial enlightenment is when you understand deeply, bone deep in your soul, that money is just a tool, a neutral force. Neither good nor evil, neither the source of happiness nor the cause of suffering. It's when you're completely free from emotional attachment to money. You can have it or not have it, gain it or lose it, and your inner peace remains undisturbed. Now, let me be very clear about something. Financial enlightenment doesn't mean you don't care about money. It doesn't mean you're irresponsible or reckless. It doesn't mean you give everything away and live in a cave. It means you've transcended the psychological drama around money. You've stopped giving it power over your emotions, your self-worth, your sense of security. People at stage 7 might be wealthy or they might not be. The external number is irrelevant. What matters is their relationship with money. I knew a monk once. Took a vow of poverty. Owned nothing but the robe on his back and a begging bowl. By any financial measure, he was at stage 1, dependent on others for his daily survival. But in terms of consciousness, in terms of his relationship with money, he was at stage 7, completely free. He could receive $1 or $1 million with the same equanimity. Neither would disturb his peace. And I've known billionaires at stage 7, people who built extraordinary wealth, but held it lightly, who understood that they didn't really own anything. They were just temporary stewards passing through, who made decisions based on values and impact rather than maximizing returns. The paradox of stage 7 is that it often leads to more wealth, not less. Because when you're free from desperate need, from fear, from attachment, you make better decisions. You see opportunities others miss. You take intelligent risks because you're not paralyzed by the fear of loss. Let me tell you what stage 7 looks like in practice. I have a friend, let's call him James, who built and sold a technology company for a substantial sum, 8 figures. Life-changing money by any standard. The day after the sale closed, James went to his office, the same modest office he'd worked in for 15 years, and started his next project. Not because he needed the money, not because he was bored, but because he had a problem he wanted to solve, a vision he wanted to pursue. His wife asked him, "Don't you want to take some time off? Travel. Relax. You've earned it." James smiled and said, "I'm not working because I have to. I'm working because I want to. This is how I relax. This is what I do for fun." A year later, his new venture was struggling, burning through capital. The prudent financial decision would have been to shut it down, cut losses, preserve his wealth. But James wasn't making decisions based on maximizing wealth. He was making decisions based on learning, growth, impact. He kept funding the project, kept iterating, kept believing in the vision. Eventually it worked. The company succeeded. But here's the important part. When I asked James later if he would have regretted the investment, if it had failed completely, he said no. He would have regretted not trying, not learning, not pursuing something he believed in. That's stage 7. That's what it means to be financially enlightened. Money becomes a tool for living according to your values, not a prison of fear or a treadmill of accumulation. Now, I want to address something that might be troubling some of you. You might be thinking, this all sounds nice in theory, but I'm at stage 1 or stage 2. I'm struggling to pay my bills. I'm drowning in debt. How is any of this philosophical talk supposed to help me? And that's a fair question, a legitimate concern. Here's my answer. The stages aren't just about money. They're about consciousness, about how you think, about the decisions you make with whatever resources you have. You can begin developing stage 7 consciousness right now, today, this moment, regardless of your current financial situation. How? By changing your relationship with money, by stopping the worship of it, by refusing to let your self-worth be determined by your net worth, by making decisions based on values rather than fear. I've known people with very little money who operated from stage 7 consciousness. They were generous with what they had. They made thoughtful decisions. They didn't complain about what they lacked. They didn't compare themselves to others. They found joy and meaning in their lives regardless of their bank balance. And I've known people with enormous wealth who operated from stage 1 consciousness, completely dependent psychologically, emotionally on maintaining and growing their wealth, terrified of loss, unable to enjoy what they had because they were so focused on getting more. The journey through the financial stages, the external journey of building wealth is important. I'm not diminishing that. Security matters. Independence matters. Having resources matters. But the internal journey, the journey of developing wisdom, perspective, proper relationship with money, that's the journey that determines whether wealth becomes a blessing or a burden. 2. Let me share with you the story of how I learned this lesson, how I moved from being wealthy to being wise about wealth. I had reached stage 6, had more money than I needed, was giving generously, felt like I had it all figured out. Then the market crashed. You remember 2008, the financial crisis. My portfolio lost 40% of its value in a matter of months. Now, rationally, I knew I was still fine. I still had more than enough. My lifestyle wasn't threatened. But emotionally, psychologically, I was a mess. I couldn't sleep. I checked my account balances constantly. I felt physically sick watching the numbers drop. I was angry at the market, at the economy, at the politicians, at everyone and everything I could blame. One day, my wife found me at 2 a.m. sitting in my office, staring at my computer screen showing my portfolio losses. She said something I'll never forget. You know what your problem is? You say money doesn't matter to you. You say you're beyond caring about wealth. But look at yourself. You're letting numbers on a screen destroy your peace. She was right. I had fooled myself. I thought I was at stage 6, maybe even touching stage 7. But the crash revealed the truth. I was still attached, still afraid, still measuring my security by my net worth. That moment was a gift, a painful gift, but a gift nonetheless. It showed me where I really was, what I really believed, where I still had work to do. I spent the next several years not just rebuilding my portfolio, though that happened naturally as markets recovered, but rebuilding my relationship with money, developing real stage 7 consciousness, true freedom. Here's what I learned. Here's what changed. I learned that security doesn't come from having a certain amount of money. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever happens, from trusting yourself, from having skills, relationships, resilience, and resourcefulness that no market crash can take away. I learned that wealth isn't what you have. It's what you don't need. The less you need to be happy, the wealthier you are, regardless of your bank balance. I learned that the best investment you can make isn't in stocks or real estate or gold or Bitcoin. It's in yourself, your health, your relationships, your skills, your character, your peace of mind. These are the assets that appreciate over time. These are the investments that compound forever. These are the sources of real wealth. I learned that giving money away, truly giving it, with no expectation of return or recognition, is one of the greatest joys in life, not because it makes you feel superior or generous, but because it breaks the spell of accumulation. It reminds you that money is meant to flow, not to stagnate. And I learned that the ultimate financial goal isn't to have more. It's to need less, to want less, to be content with enough, because contentment, true contentment, is the only form of wealth that can never be taken from you. Let me bring this together now. Let me show you how these 7 stages connect, how they build on each other, how they form a path not just to financial independence, but to financial wisdom. Stage 1 through 3, dependence, solvency, stability. These are about building the foundation, about climbing out of the hole and creating a platform you can stand on. This is where most of the heavy lifting happens. This is where discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification matter most. If you're in these stages right now, don't despair. Don't feel like you're failing because you haven't reached independence yet. You're doing the most important work. You're building the base of the pyramid. Without this foundation, everything else collapses. Stage 4 and 5, security and independence, these are about freedom. Freedom from necessity. Freedom to choose. Freedom to design your life according to your values rather than your debts. This is where most people want to get to. This is the financial freedom everyone talks about, and it's wonderful, truly. Being financially independent is a tremendous gift, but if you stop there, if you think independence is the end of the journey, you'll miss the deepest lessons that money has to teach. Stage 6 and 7, abundance and enlightenment. These are about transcendence, about moving beyond personal benefit to collective impact, about understanding money not as an end but as a means, about developing wisdom. And here's the beautiful secret. You don't have to wait until you reach stage 6 financially to develop stage 6 and 7 consciousness. You can cultivate abundance mindset, an enlightened relationship with money right now, wherever you are on the journey. In fact, and this is crucial, developing that consciousness helps you move through the earlier stages more effectively. Because when you're not driven by fear or greed, when you're making decisions from clarity and values, you make better financial choices. So where are you right now on this 7-stage journey? Be honest with yourself. Are you at stage 1, financially dependent, living paycheck to paycheck without a foundation beneath you? If so, your path is clear. Not easy, but clear. You need to create a gap between earning and spending. You need to keep more than you spend. You need to start building. Are you at stage 2, working to achieve solvency, paying off debt, finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel? Keep going. Don't give up. Every payment brings you closer to freedom. Every month of progress builds momentum. Are you at stage 3, stable and secure, with an emergency fund and a foundation? Congratulations. You've achieved something most people never do. Now the question is, what's next? Are you content here, or do you want to continue building toward independence? Are you at stage 4 or 5, financially secure or independent, with investments covering your needs or lifestyle? This is a profound achievement. But ask yourself, what are you doing with this freedom? Are you using it to pursue meaning and purpose? Or are you drifting? Are you at stage 6 with more than enough, with abundance beyond your needs? Then your question is, what's this for? What impact will you make? What legacy will you leave? How will you steward the resources you've been given? Or have you perhaps touched stage 7, that place of wisdom and peace where your inner state is independent of your outer circumstances. Wherever you are, the next step is always the same: take one more step forward. Not a giant leap, not a desperate sprint, just one more step, because the journey through these stages isn't a race. There's no prize for getting there fastest. The journey itself is the point. The person you become along the way is the real wealth you're building. Now let me tell you what nobody talks about when they discuss financial independence. The shadow side, the challenges that emerge not from having too little, but from having enough or more than enough. Because here's a truth that might surprise you: achieving financial independence doesn't solve your problems. It reveals them. When money is tight, when you're struggling, you can blame your unhappiness on your circumstances. If only I had more money, everything would be better. If only I was financially free, I'd be happy. But what happens when you get there? When the money is no longer an issue? When you have security, independence, freedom, you discover that many of your problems weren't about money at all. They were about meaning, purpose, identity, relationships, the things you were avoiding by staying busy, by staying in the struggle. I've seen this destroy people. They work for 30 years to reach financial independence. They sacrifice time with family. They postpone joy. They tell themselves, when I'm financially free, then I'll really start living. And then they get there. And they realize they don't know how to live. They don't know who they are without their work identity. They don't know what brings them joy beyond accumulation. They've reached the destination only to discover they have nowhere to go. Let me share a story about this, about a man named David. David was a surgeon, brilliant, dedicated, earned an excellent income. He invested wisely from early in his career. By age 53, he was financially independent. His investments generated more than his lifestyle required. He decided to retire, to finally enjoy life, to do all those things he'd put off during his medical career. Within a year, his marriage was falling apart. His wife told me later, "I thought I wanted him home. I thought it would be wonderful." But he was miserable, and his misery infected everything. He'd spent 30 years as Dr. David, and he didn't know how to be just David. David tried to fill his time, took up golf, got bored, started woodworking, lost interest, traveled with his wife, came home early because he felt unmoored without purpose. He gained weight, started drinking more, became irritable and depressed, all while having more money than he could spend, more freedom than he'd ever had, more time than he'd ever imagined. What was David's problem? Was it money? No. He had solved the money problem completely. His problem was that he had built his entire identity on being productive, being needed, being important in his field. When he removed that structure, there was nothing underneath, no sense of self independent of his role, no intrinsic purpose beyond his external achievements. David eventually went back to practicing medicine, part-time, pro bono work in underserved communities, not because he needed the money, but because he needed the meaning, the purpose, the sense that he was contributing something valuable to the world. And you know what? He was happier working 3 days a week for free than he'd been retired with all the time and money in the world. That's the lesson. Financial independence without personal independence is hollow. Money freedom without emotional freedom is a cage made of gold. So how do you avoid David's fate? How do you prepare for financial independence in a way that makes it a blessing rather than a crisis? First, you build a life, not just a portfolio. You develop interests, relationships, and pursuits that have nothing to do with making money. You cultivate parts of yourself that aren't about productivity or achievement. You learn who you are beyond your job title, beyond your bank balance, beyond your achievements and accomplishments. This isn't something you can do overnight. It's something you have to work on throughout your journey, starting now, wherever you are. Second, you maintain meaningful work. Now, work doesn't mean a job. It doesn't mean something you do for money. It means activity that creates value, that contributes, that gives your days structure and purpose. For some people, that's starting a foundation. For others, it's teaching or mentoring. For others, it's creating art or writing or building things. The specific activity doesn't matter. What matters is that it's meaningful to you and valuable to others. Third, you invest in relationships, real relationships, deep relationships, not networking contacts, not business associates, but people who know you, who challenge you, who care about you as a human being, not as a resource or an opportunity. Because at the end of your life, and I say this having watched many people reach that end, what matters isn't how much wealth you accumulated. It's who loved you, who you loved, what you contributed, what you created, how you treated people. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back time with your children when they were young. It can't buy genuine friendship. It can't buy respect that wasn't earned. It can't buy a life well lived. Let me tell you about my greatest financial mistake. Not the investments I got wrong, not the opportunities I missed. My greatest mistake. I spent my 30s and 40s building wealth, working long hours, making smart investments, accumulating assets. I was good at it, very good at it, and I was proud of that. But while I was building my portfolio, my children were growing up. My daughter learned to ride a bike, and I wasn't there. My son played in his first soccer game, and I was in a business meeting. Birthdays, school plays, family dinners, I was present for some, absent for others, and mentally distracted during most. I told myself I was doing it for them, building security for the family, creating a foundation for their future. And there was truth in that. My hard work did provide them with opportunities and advantages. But you know what? My children didn't need a trust fund as much as they needed a present father. They didn't need financial security as much as they needed emotional security. They didn't need a wealthy dad as much as they needed an available dad. And the time I missed those years when they were young and wanted me around, I can never get that back, ever. No amount of money can buy those moments again. I was so focused on providing for their future that I missed their present. I was so busy building financial capital that I failed to build relational capital. I optimized for the wrong things. This is the trap of the financial independence journey if you're not careful. You can become so focused on the destination that you forget to live during the trip. You can sacrifice the present so completely for the future that when the future finally arrives, you realize you've squandered the most precious resource you had, time with the people you love. Here's what I wish someone had told me when I was young and ambitious and building wealth. The goal isn't to get rich quick so you can start living. The goal is to live richly now while building wealth steadily over time. You don't have to choose between financial security and living meaningfully. You don't have to sacrifice everything today for security tomorrow. That's a false dichotomy that our culture perpetuates, but that isn't actually true. What you need is balance, intentionality, a clear understanding of what you're building wealth for, and a commitment to not sacrificing the things that actually matter while you're building it. You need to ask yourself constantly, what am I optimizing for? Am I optimizing for maximum net worth or for maximum life satisfaction? Am I playing to win the money game or playing to win the life game? Because those are different games with different rules and different scorecards. You can win the money game and lose the life game. I've seen it happen countless times. People who reach stage 5 or 6 financially but are lonely, unhealthy, disconnected from their families, full of regrets. Or you can win the life game while making steady progress in the money game. Not as fast, not as dramatically, but in a way that you can look back on with peace and satisfaction. Let me talk now about legacy, about what you leave behind. Most people think legacy is about money, how much you pass on to your children, the size of the estate, the financial inheritance. And yes, financial legacy matters. Providing for your family matters. Creating opportunities for the next generation matters. But I want to suggest that financial legacy is actually the least important part of what you leave behind. The real legacy, the legacy that lasts, is wisdom, values, character, the lessons you taught, the example you set, the way you treated people, the lives you touched. I know a man who inherited $5 million from his father. Within 10 years, he'd spent it all, lost it on bad investments, expensive lifestyle, and poor decisions. The money, which his father had spent a lifetime building, was gone in a decade, but you know what lasted. The work ethic his father had modeled, the integrity his father had demonstrated, the values his father had instilled. Those became the foundation on which this man eventually rebuilt his life and created his own success. The money was temporary. The lessons were permanent. I know another man who inherited very little money, but tremendous wisdom from his grandfather. Stories about patience, about persistence, about making ethical decisions even when they cost you in the short term, about treating people with dignity regardless of their status. That wisdom shaped his life, guided his decisions, helped him build his own wealth, and, more importantly, build a meaningful life. He tells those stories to his own children now, passing on the legacy his grandfather gave him. That's the legacy that matters. That's the inheritance that truly provides for future generations. So as you move through these 7 stages, as you build your wealth, I want you to think about what you're really building. Are you building just a portfolio, or are you building a life? Are you accumulating just money, or are you accumulating wisdom, relationships, experiences, and character? Are you creating just financial capital, or are you creating human capital, social capital, spiritual capital? Because at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you won't be remembered for your net worth. You'll be remembered for your impact, for how you made people feel, for what you contributed, for who you were. Your children won't gather at your funeral and talk about your investment returns. They'll talk about the time you spent with them, the lessons you taught them, the example you set, the love you showed. Your friends won't remember your bank balance. They'll remember your generosity, your kindness, your loyalty, your character. Your community won't care how many zeros were in your account. They'll care about how you used your resources, what you built, what you supported, what you made possible for others. That's the ultimate stage of financial wisdom. Understanding that money is a tool for creating a meaningful life, not a scorecard for measuring your worth. Let me bring all of this together now with some practical guidance. Because philosophy without application is just entertainment. Wisdom without action is just knowledge. If you're at stage 1, dependence, struggling to make ends meet, here's what you need to do. Create a gap, any gap, between what you earn and what you spend. 5%, 10% if possible. Whatever you can manage, and guard that gap fiercely. That gap is the seed of your financial future. Plant it, protect it, let it grow. Stop comparing yourself to others. Comparison is the enemy of progress when you're building from nothing. Run your own race. Build your own foundation. Focus on your next step, not someone else's finish line. Invest in yourself, your skills, your knowledge, your health, your relationships. These investments compound forever and can never be taken from you. If you're at stage 2 solvency, climbing out of debt, fighting to reach 0, stay focused. Don't get distracted by investment opportunities or wealth-building strategies. Right now, your best investment is debt elimination. Every dollar of high-interest debt you eliminate gives you a guaranteed return better than almost any investment you could make. Celebrate small victories. Paid off a credit card. That's huge. Reduced your balance by $1,000. That's progress. Acknowledge how far you've come, even as you keep moving forward. Build momentum. As you pay off smaller debts, take what you were paying on them and apply it to larger debts. Let your progress accelerate. Feel the power of forward movement. If you're at stage 3, stability with an emergency fund and a foundation, don't get comfortable. Stability is wonderful, but it's not the end. It's the platform from which you launch. It's the base camp, not the summit. Start learning about investing, not gambling, not speculation. Investing. Building a portfolio of assets that generate passive income. Creating systems that work for you while you sleep. Think long term. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. The magic of compound returns requires time. Start now, even if you start small, if you're at stage 4 or 5, security or independence. Remember why you built this. Don't let the accumulation become addictive. Don't let the freedom become paralyzing. Use what you've built to create a life of meaning and impact. Give generously. Not just money, though money matters, but also time, attention, wisdom, mentorship. Be the person you needed when you were starting out. Stay humble. You didn't achieve this alone. You had advantages, opportunities, luck. Success isn't purely personal achievement. Honor that truth with gratitude and generosity. If you're at stage 6, abundance, understand your responsibility. You're a steward now, not just an owner. These resources can change lives, create opportunities, solve problems. What will you do with them? Think beyond yourself. Your family is provided for. Your needs are met. Now what bigger game can you play? What larger contribution can you make? Create systems for giving, not random acts of generosity, though those are beautiful, but systematic, strategic philanthropy that creates lasting change. And if you're touching stage 7, enlightenment, share your wisdom, tell your stories, mentor others, be the guide you wish you'd had. Your experience, your lessons, your mistakes, these have value beyond measure to people earlier in the journey. Stay grounded. Wealth can distort your perspective. It can isolate you. Surround yourself with people who knew you before, who see you as a human being, not a bank account. Remember that money is just money. It's neither good nor evil. It's a tool. What matters is who you are, how you treat people, and what you do with your time on this earth. Now let me tell you what happens at the end. What really matters when it all comes to a close. I've been privileged in my life to know many people as they approach their final days. Wealthy people and poor people, famous people and unknown people, successful people by every worldly measure, and people who never achieved what the world calls success. And I've learned something profound from watching people face their mortality. The things people regret at the end are never about money, never about not accumulating enough, never about financial mistakes or missed investment opportunities. The regrets are always about time, about relationships, about words left unsaid and experiences not shared, about working too much and living too little, about prioritizing things that didn't matter and neglecting things that did. I've never heard someone on their deathbed say, "I wish I'd spent more time at the office," or "I wish I'd saved more money," or "I wish I'd been more careful with my expenses." But I've heard countless people say, "I wish I'd spent more time with my children. I wish I'd told my spouse I loved them more often. I wish I'd taken that trip. I wish I'd been braver, more generous, more present, more alive." The lesson is clear. Don't sacrifice what matters for what doesn't. Don't trade irreplaceable time for replaceable money. Don't postpone living while you're busy preparing to live. Financial independence. Moving through these 7 stages, it's not about the money. It never was. It's about freedom. The freedom to spend your time doing what matters, with people who matter, in service of things that matter. It's about wisdom, understanding what money can do and what it can't, what it's for and what it isn't, how to use it as a tool without letting it become a master. It's about peace, the deep, abiding peace that comes from living according to your values, from knowing you have enough, from being free of the anxiety that dominates so many lives. It's about impact, using whatever resources you have, whether that's 100 or 100 million, to make the world a little better, to help people, to create value, to leave things better than you found them. And ultimately, it's about love, because what is money for really, except to care for the people we love, to protect them, provide for them, create opportunities for them, and give them the gift of our presence because we're not consumed by the struggle for survival. 2. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself at the end of your life. You're looking back on the journey, on the decisions you made, the priorities you chose, the way you spent your time and money and energy. What do you want to see? What do you want to feel? What do you want to have accomplished? Do you want to see a large bank balance? Or do you want to see a life well lived? Do you want to see impressive achievements? Or do you want to see meaningful relationships? Do you want to see wealth accumulated? Or do you want to see wisdom acquired? The beautiful truth is you don't have to choose. You can have financial success and a meaningful life. You can build wealth and build character. You can achieve financial independence and maintain emotional connection. But you have to be intentional about it. You have to know what you're building and why. You have to keep the proper relationship with money, using it as a tool, never worshiping it as a god. 2. So here's my challenge to you, respected viewers, dear friends. Start where you are, with whatever you have, whatever stage you're in today, right now. Not with some dramatic gesture, not with some perfect plan, but with one small step, one conscious choice, one movement in the right direction. If you're in debt, make one extra payment. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, save $1. If you have an emergency fund, invest 1 percentage point more. If you're wealthy, give one gift that matters. And then tomorrow, take another step. And the day after another. Small, consistent, intentional actions, compounded over time, create extraordinary results. But even more importantly, starting today, work on your relationship with money. Work on understanding what enough means for you. Work on developing stage 7 consciousness, regardless of your stage 1 through 6 financial position. Because the real wealth, the wealth that matters, the wealth that creates peace and joy and meaning, isn't found in your bank account. It's found in your mind, in your heart, in your values, in your relationships, and how you spend your days. Let me share one final story with you. The story that, in many ways, summarizes everything I've learned about money and wealth and what really matters. There was a fisherman, lived in a small coastal village. Every morning, he'd go out in his boat, catch enough fish to feed his family, and sell a few at the market. Then he'd come home, have lunch with his wife, play with his children, take a nap, and spend the evening with friends playing music and telling stories. One day, a wealthy businessman visited the village. He saw the fisherman and said, "You're wasting your potential. You should fish longer hours, catch more fish, sell them for more money." The fisherman asked, "Why would I do that?" The businessman explained, "So you could buy a bigger boat. Then you could catch even more fish, make even more money. Eventually, you could buy multiple boats, hire crews, build a fleet. And then what?" asked the fisherman. "Then you could sell the business for millions, retire wealthy, live in a beautiful place, spend your time with your family and friends, doing what you love." The fisherman smiled and said, "But that's what I'm doing now." You see, that fisherman understood something the businessman didn't. He had already achieved the thing that all the wealth was supposed to provide. He had time. He had relationships. He had peace. He had enough. Now, I'm not suggesting we all become subsistence fishermen. I'm not saying don't build wealth. Don't pursue financial independence. Don't work hard and invest wisely. What I'm saying is this: know what you're building wealth for. Make sure the goal isn't to someday live the life you could be living now, just with more money. Make sure you're not sacrificing present joy for future security so completely that you miss your life. Build wealth, yes. Move through the stages, yes. Achieve financial independence, absolutely. But do it in a way that honors what really matters. Do it in a way that you can look back on with peace, knowing you lived well along the way. The 7 stages of financial independence, they're not just about money. They're a framework for understanding your relationship with resources, with security, with freedom, with purpose. Stage 1 through 3 teach you discipline. Stages 4 and 5 give you freedom. Stages 6 and 7 offer you wisdom. The journey matters more than the destination. The person you become matters more than the wealth you accumulate. The life you live matters more than the legacy you leave. And the ultimate success isn't reaching stage 7 financially. It's reaching stage 7 consciously. It's understanding deeply and truly that you already have everything you need to be at peace. The rest is just details. So go now. Take your next step. Wherever you are on this journey, move forward with intention and wisdom. Build your wealth, but don't let it build your identity. Achieve financial independence, but don't let money define your freedom. Create abundance, but remember that the greatest abundance is gratitude for what you already have. And seek enlightenment, not just financial enlightenment, but human enlightenment. The understanding that you are not your bank balance. You are not your net worth. You are something far more valuable, far more permanent, far more real. You are a conscious being alive in this moment with the capacity to love, to create, to contribute, to make a difference. That's your true wealth. That's the treasure no market crash can destroy, no inflation can erode, no circumstance can take away. Guard that wealth. Invest in that wealth. Let that wealth compound.